Oh my god, it's the lockout.
Yes please. At Not Matcha you leveled up to level 4.
That's right, level 4 baby, let's go. Well, this is a 4 on 4, of course.
Okay, I may jump for a few.
Okay.
Lost the lead. They'll think twice next time. Gained the lead.
Damn it. I missed that back tap.
I don't know what I want, I'm not in a super great mood, maybe it would be good to go to bed and let it pass.
Okay, well, if you decide to play, then just send me an invite and I'll drop everything and I'll be there. If not, I understand, you know, I hope I feel better. And let me know
There
if
is
I
no
can
need
help.
to donate more than 5 bits and Bot Rix has correctly joined the channel.
Like he knows I'm in.
That's really kind, Mocha.
Oh, shit.
Gained the lead. Killing spree. Be proud, Spartan.
How's there a guy over here? Oh my god, what? There's like a whole other side of the map over
Nah,
here?
just feel like a kid and I don't feel like asking to permission or if it's okay because I just feel like I have to every time I play UG.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I get it. That sucks. That sucks. Sorry, Angel.
You're quite lethal with that.
I'm sorry.
It's my fucking fault. Just feels icky like I don't have independence sometimes.
Right.
Power items en route. Power items now available.
Anyways, lol, not a chat for chat, just had to have a quick vent.
Gotcha. Oh, I fell off the map.
I'm sorry and thank you.
It's not a chat for chat. Yeah, true. No, yeah, I get it. Hey, you know, let me know if there's anything I can do. Oh, shnikey.
Outstanding.
Did I see something over there? Like another elbow? No, I didn't. Okay.
Halfway to victory.
Oh, you son of a bitch.
Power items en route.
Haha, I got the bot. Oh shit. Did he just jump off the map? Crap.
Double kill.
Oh shit. Ow. Oh my god, I got 16.
5 minutes. Double kill. Another one put down. Nearing victory. Power items down.
The shit. Is that bot sniping me? That bot was sniping me, man.
Power items on the field. Another trophy for the park. You're quite lethal with that.
Oh, that bot got me. That's pretty good. Pretty good.
Sniper inbound. S7 sniper available.
Steak. Let's go.
Steak. I could eat that all night long.
Okay, just crash the whole game. Alright, I guess I'll play Arena. I'll get this one up on Arena. What's up, bro? 539, bro. It's pretty good. Yeah, I agree, man. Good job. Yeah, I think it's about time I have to learn how to one cycle. And I'm not excited. I am not exalted.
Yet the coracle would but bounce a little, dance as if on springs, and subside on the other side into the trough as lightly as a bird. I began after a little to grow very bold, and sat up to try my skill at paddling, but even a small change in the disposition of the weight will produce violent changes in the behaviour of a coracle, and I had hardly moved before the boat, giving up at once her gentle dancing movement, ran straight down a slope of water so steep that it made me giddy, and struck her nose, with a spout of spray, deep into the side of the next wave. I was drenched and terrified, and fell instantly back into my old position, whereupon the coracle seemed to find her head again, and led me softly as before among the billows. It was plain she was not to be interfered with, and, at any rate, since I could in no way influence her course, what hope had I of reaching land? I began to be horribly frightened, but I kept my head for all that. First, moving with all care, I gradually bailed out the coracle with my sea cap. Then, getting my eye once more above the gunwale, I set myself to study how it was she managed to slip so quietly through the rollers. I found each wave, instead of the big, smooth, glossy mountain it looks from the shore, or from a vessel's deck, was for all the world like any range of hills on the dry land, full of peaks and smooth places and valleys. The coracle, left to herself, turning from side to side, threaded, so to speak, her way through these lower parts, and avoided the steep slopes and higher toppling summits of the wave. Well now, thought I to myself, it is plain I must lie where I am, and not disturb the balance, but it is plain also that I can put the paddle over the side, and from time to time, in smooth places, give her a shove or two towards land. No sooner thought upon than done. There I lay on my elbows in the most trying attitude, and every now and again gave a weak stroke or two to turn her head to shore. It was very tiring and slow work, yet I did visibly gain ground, and as we drew near the Cape of the Woods, though I saw I must infallibly miss that point, I had still made some 100 yards of easting. I was indeed close in. I could see the cool green treetops swaying together in the breeze, and I felt sure I should make the next promontory without fail. It was high time, for I now began to be tortured with thirst. The glow of the sun from above, its thousand-fold reflection from the waves, the sea water that fell and dried upon me, caking my very lips with salt, combined to make my throat burn and my brain ache. The sight of the trees so near at hand had almost made me sick with longing, but the current had soon carried me past the point, and as the next reach of sea opened out, I beheld a sight that changed the nature of my thoughts. Right in front of me, not half a mile away, I beheld the Hispaniola under sail. I made sure, of course, that I should be taken, but I was so distressed for want of water that I scarcely knew whether to be glad or sorry at the thought, and long before I had come to the conclusion, surprise had taken possession of my mind, and I could do nothing but stare and wonder. The Hispaniola was under her mainsail and 2 jibs, and the beautiful white canvas shone in the sun like snow or silver. When I first sighted her, all her sails were drawing. She was laying a course about northwest, and I presumed the men on board were going round the island on their way back to the anchorage. Presently she began to fetch more and more to the westward, so that I thought they had sighted me and were going about in chase. At last, however, she fell right into the wind's eye, was taken dead aback, and stood there a while helpless, with her sails shivering. "Clumsy fellows," said I. "They must be still drunk as owls." And I thought how Captain Smollett would have set them skipping. Meanwhile the schooner gradually fell off, and, filled again upon another tack, sailed swiftly for a minute or so, and brought up once more, dead in the wind's eye. Again and again this was repeated. To and fro, up and down, north, south, east and west, the Hispaniola sailed by swoops and dashes, and, at each repetition, ended as she had begun, with idly flapping canvas. It became plain to me that nobody was steering, and if so, where were the men? Either they were dead drunk, or had deserted her, I thought, and perhaps if I could get on board, I might return the vessel to her captain. The current was bearing coracle and schooner southward at an equal rate. As for the latter's sailing, it was so wild and intermittent, and she hung each time so long in irons, that she certainly gained nothing, if she did not even lose. If I only dared to sit up and paddle, I made sure that I could overhaul her. The scheme had an air of adventure that inspired me, and the thought of the water breaker beside the fore companion doubled my growing courage. Up I got, was welcomed almost instantly by another cloud of spray, but this time stuck to my purpose and set myself with all my strength and caution to paddle after the unsteered Hispaniola. Once I shipped a sea so heavy that I had to stop and bail, with my heart fluttering like a bird, but gradually I got into the way of the thing, and guided my coracle among the waves, with only now and then a blow upon her bows and a dash of foam in my face. I was now gaining rapidly on the schooner. I could see the brass glisten on the tiller as it banged about, and still no soul appeared upon her decks. I could not choose but suppose she was deserted. If not, the men were lying drunk below, where I might batten them down perhaps, and do what I chose with the ship. For some time she had been doing the worst thing possible for me, standing still. She headed nearly due south, yawing, of course, all the time. Each time she fell off, her sails partly filled, and these brought her in a moment right to the wind again. I have said this was the worst thing possible for me, for helpless as she looked in this situation, with the canvas crackling like cannon and the blocks trundling and banging on the deck, she still continued to run away from me, not only with the speed of the current, but by the whole amount of her leeway, which was naturally great. But now at last I had my chance. The breeze fell for some seconds very low, and the current gradually turning her, the Hispaniola revolved slowly around her centre, and at last presented me her stern, with the cabin window still gaping open, and the lamp over the table still burning on into the day. The mainsail hung drooped like a banner. She was stock still but for the current. For the last little while I had even lost, but now, redoubling my efforts, I began once more to overhaul the chase. I was not 100 yards from her when the wind came again in a clap. She filled on the port tack and was off again, stooping and skimming like a swallow. My first impulse was one of despair, but my second was towards joy. Round she came till she was broadside on to me, round still till she had covered a half, and then 2/3, and then 3/4 of the distance that separated us. I could see the waves boiling white under her forefoot. Immensely tall she looked to me from my low station in the coracle. And then, of a sudden, I began to comprehend. I had scarce time to think, scarce time to act and save myself. I was on the summit of one swell when the schooner came swooping over the next. The bowsprit was over my head. I sprang on my feet and leapt, stamping the coracle under water. With one hand I caught the jibboom, while my foot was lodged between the stay and the brace, and as I still clung there panting, a dull blow told me that the schooner had charged down upon and struck the coracle, and that I was left without retreat on the Hispaniola. End of chapter 24.
Irresistible force, meet up.
Enemy there. Enemy field's down.
Quantum translocator inbound.
Defeat.
Nice! Which one? Okay, now the glitch one is basically you just quit the game and then reload into the world after you're in the end to get the dragon to reperch. But you can just do it at any point. No, kind of like when you're in the middle or whatever. Before you do the crit. Yeah, and don't start over, just reload into the same world. Okay.
Obfuscation support. An ally is converting the extraction device. Extraction complete. Site incoming. Site ready. Enemy extractor deploying. Double kill. M41 Spanker inbound. An ally is converting the extraction device. Device converted. M41 Spanker available. They're claiming our extraction device. A friendly is claiming the extraction device.
Oh.
Extraction complete. Site incoming. Site ready. Fine shot. The enemy is readying an extractor. M41 Spanker inbound. M41 Spanker available. kill. M41 Spanker available. Extraction complete. They're claiming our extraction device. Site incoming. Site ready. Deploying extraction device. Site extracted.
Another one down.
Five minutes remaining. Slayer. Rack up the most kills to achieve victory.
Active camo here. Down.
see headshots in your future.
DK-78 Commando. Enemy Spartans are closing in. Target spotted.
King of the hill. Hill incoming. Claiming it is easy. Keeping it, on the other hand. Hill ready. Enemy team took the hill. Hill control. Enemy team took the hill. Hill control.
We've lost a teammate.
Enemy team took the hill.
Down there.
Enemy about to score. Enemy about to score.
Enemy Spartans are closing in. Pop the shield.
Enemy team scored. Hill incoming. Hill ready. Enemy team took the hill.
Shit.
They're under us.
Enemy team scored. Hill incoming. Hill ready. Enemy team took the hill.
Tango's closing in.
Active camo inbound. Active camo available. Defeat.
Yes, please.
Extraction. Sight incoming. Sight ready. The Conqueror's weapon in your hands. Enemy extracted. Ninja. Rockets. incoming. Site ready. An ally is deploying the extraction device. Site extracted.
Pop their shields.
Enemies are converting our extraction device.
Above us.
An ally is converting the extraction device. Device converted. F-41 Spanker inbound. F-41 Spanker available.
Another one down. Tango's closing in.
Still there?
Take it off. Extraction complete. Site incoming. Site ready. A friendly is arming the extraction device. Site extracting. They're claiming our extraction device. They're claiming our extraction device.
One
F-41
shot
Spanker
over.
available.
Nice.
Extraction complete. Site incoming. Site ready. Site extracting. Time for some close quarters poetry.
One shot on my X. One shot on my X, just hiding in the corner.
Enemies are converting our extraction device. Extraction complete. Site incoming.
You guys are
F-41
fucking
Spanker
crap.
inbound. Site ready.
Fucking dog food, bro. We're in the room. Go to it. We can start doing it.
Outstanding.
Enemy there.
M41 Spanker, inbound. Incoming. M41 Spanker,
Guys,
available.
we need rocket launcher.
Sight ready.
We need rocket launcher.
An
Kill it.
ally is deploying the extraction device. Sight extraction. Enemies are converting our extraction device. Rockets.
One shot on my axe. One more coming. Two more coming. Two more coming. Nice help side the jokes as well.
Double kill. Extraction complete. Victory.
You guys are trash. Yeah, she got 9 kills.
Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson. Read by Adrian Pretzelis. Chapter 31. The Treasure Hunt. Flint's Pointer. "Jim," said Silver when we were alone, "if I saved your life, you saved mine, and I'll not forget it. I seen the doctor waving you to run for it, with the tail of my eye I did, and I seen you say no, as plain as hearing. Jim, that's one to you. This is the first glint of hope I had since the tack failed, and I owe it to you. And now, Jim, we're to go in for this here treasure hunting, with sealed orders too, and I don't like it. And you and me must stick close, back to back like, and we'll save our necks in spite of fate and fortune." Just then a man hailed us from the fire that breakfast was ready, and we were soon seated here and there about the sand over biscuit and fried junk. They had lighted a fire fit to roast an ox, and it was now grown so hot that they could only approach it from the windward, and even there not without precaution. In the same wasteful spirit they had cooked, I suppose, 3 times more than we could eat, and one of them, with an empty laugh, threw what was left into the fire, which blazed and roared again over this unusual fuel. I never in my life saw men so careless of the morrow. Hand to mouth is the only word that can describe their way of doing. And what with wasted food and sleeping sentries, though they were bold enough for a brush and be done with it, I could see their entire unfitness.
revealed themselves.
Enemy captured your flag.
Carry the flag back to base. You're exposed, Spartan. They have our flag. Take it back.
Flag returned. Flag captured.
They know where you are. Power items now available.
Enemy flag returned. Mind the gap.
It's yours. Now capture it. Power weapons inbound. You're exposed, Spartan. There are eyes on you, Spartan. They know where you are. Power weapons have arrived.
Flag captured.
They've taken our flag. The enemy carrier
Enemy flag returned.
Power weapons en route. Stop all, deployed. Power weapons on the field.
Shaka, way too many of us.
You're about to be very popular. You're exposed, Spartan.
Mark their
Look
shields.
there, an enemy flag carrier.
Flag returned. Enemy flag returned.
My shield's popped.
Outstanding.
5 minutes remaining.
Run, you magnificent warrior. They know where you are. Power items inbound.
Enemy flag returned.
Power items now available. It's yours. Now capture it. We have eyes on the enemy flag carrier. How tragic for them. We have eyes on the enemy flag carrier.
Double kill.
Be proud, Spartan.
Flag returned. Goal line stand. Flag captured. Victory.
Silver 5.
for anything like a prolonged campaign. Even Silver, eating away with Captain Flint upon his shoulder, had not a word of blame for their recklessness. And this the more surprised me, for I thought he had never showed himself so cunning as he did then. "Aye, mates," said he, "it's luck you have barbecue to think for you this here head. I got what I wanted, I did. Sure enough, they have the ship. Where they have it I don't know yet. But once we hit the treasure, we'll have to jump about and find. And then, mates, it's that as the boats, I reckon, has the upper hand." Thus he kept running on, with his mouth full of the hot bacon. Thus he restored their hope and confidence, and, I more than suspect, repaired his own at the same time. "As for hostage," he continued, "that's my last talk, I guess, with them he loves so dear. I've got my piece of news, and thank you to him for that. But it's over and done. I'll take him in a line when we go treasure hunting, for we'll keep him like so much gold in case of accident, you mark, in the meantime. Once we got the ship and treasure both, and off to sea like jolly companions, why, then we'll talk Mr. Hawkins over, we will, and we'll give him his share, to be sure, for all his kindness." It was no wonder the men were in good humour now. For my part, I was horribly cast down. Should the scheme he now sketched prove feasible, Silver, already doubly a traitor, would not hesitate to adopt it. He had still a foot in either camp, and there was no doubt he would prefer wealth and freedom with the pirates to a bare escape from hanging, which was the best he had to hope on our side. Nay, and even if things fell out that he was forced to keep his faith with Dr. Livesey, even then what danger lay before us! What a moment that would be when the suspicions of his followers turned to certainty, and he and I should have to fight for dear life. He a cripple, and I a boy, against 5 strong and active seamen. Add to this double
Hey, bro. The captain said that you're by far the best 40th pick he could have gotten. The captain said I was the best 40th pick. Yeah, he said by far.
That's a funny joke, right?
Why?
Oh no, is it an actual compliment?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, awesome.
Good, like you're putting up, since you've completed like 5 runs or something, you put up a lot of points. So, yeah, good job, bro. It does sound a little bit like a joke. But I think there's a lot of people who aren't even running, so. What am I going to run right now? Let's do RSG. Okay. Oh.
apprehension the mystery that still hung over the behaviour of my friends, their unexplained desertion of the stockade, their inexplicable cession of the chart, or harder still to understand, the doctor's last warning to Silver, "Look out for squalls when you find it." And you will readily believe how little taste I found in my breakfast, and with how uneasy a heart I set forth behind my captors on the quest for treasure. We made a curious figure, had anyone been there to see us, all in soiled sailor clothes, and all but me armed to the teeth. Silver had 2 guns slung about him, one before and one behind, besides the great cutlass at his waist, and a pistol in each pocket of his square-tailed coat. To complete his strange appearance, Captain Flint sat perched upon his shoulder and gabbled odds and ends of purposeless sea talk. I had a line about my waist, and followed obediently after the sea cook, who held the loose end of the rope, now in his free hand, now between his powerful teeth. For all the world, I was led like a dancing bear. The other men were variously burdened, some carrying picks and shovels, for that had been the very first necessary they brought ashore from the Hispaniola, others laden with pork, bread and brandy for the midday meal. All the stores, I observed, came from our stock. I could see the truth of Silver's words the night before. Had he not struck a bargain with the doctor, he and his mutineers, deserted by the ship, must have been driven to subsist on clear water and the proceeds of their hunting. Water would have been little to their taste. A sailor is not usually a good shot, and besides all that, when they were so short of eatables, it was not likely they would be very flush of powder. Well, thus equipped, we all set out, even the fellow with the broken head, who should certainly have kept in shadow, and straggled one after another to the beach, where the 2 gigs awaited us. Even these bore trace of the drunken folly of the pirates, one in a broken thwart, and both in their muddied and unbaled condition. Both were to be carried along with us for the sake of safety, and so, with our numbers divided between them, we set forth upon the bosom of the anchorage. As we pulled across, there was some discussion on the chart. The Red Cross was, of course, far too large to be a guide, and the terms of the note on the back, as you will hear, admitted of some ambiguity. They ran, the reader may remember, thus: Tall tree, spyglass shoulder, bearing a point to the N of NNE, Skeleton Island, ESE, and by E, 10 feet. A tall tree was thus the principal mark. Now, right before us, the anchorage was bounded by a plateau from 200 to 300 feet high, adjoining on the north and sloping southern shoulder of the spyglass, and rising again toward the south into the rough, cliffy eminence called the Mizzenmast Hill. The top of the plateau was dotted thickly with pine trees of varying height. Here and there, one of a different species rose 40 or 50 feet clear above its neighbours, and which of these was the particular tall tree of Captain Flint could only be decided on the spot and by the readings of the compass. Yet, although that was the case, every man on board the boats had picked a favourite of his own ere we were halfway over, Long John alone shrugging his shoulders and bidding them wait till they were there. We pulled easily by Silver's directions, not to weary the hands prematurely, and after quite a long passage landed at the mouth of the second river, that which runs down a woody cleft of the spyglass. Thence, bending to our left, we began to ascend the slope towards the plateau. At the very outset, heavy, miry ground and a matted marsh vegetation greatly delayed our progress, but by little and little the hill began to steepen and become stony underfoot, and the wood to change its character and to grow in a more open order. It was indeed a most pleasant portion of the island that we were now approaching. A heavy scented broom and many flowering shrubs had almost taken the place of grass. Thickets of green nutmeg trees were dotted here and there with the red columns and the broad shadow of the pines, and the first mingled their spice with the aroma of the others. The air, besides, was fresh and stirring, and this, under the sheer sunbeams, was a wonderful refreshment to our senses.
Sure.
The party spread itself abroad in a fan shape, shouting and leaping to and fro. About the centre, and a good way behind the rest, Silver and I followed, I tethered by my rope,
I would.
he ploughing with
If you do the glitch, it undoes the crit.
From time to time, indeed, I had to lend him a hand, or he must have missed his footing.
I think it helps
desktop
desktop players more than controller players, but it's one of the categories.
And were approaching the brow of the
Does that make
plateau
sense?
when the man upon the farthest left
Oh,
began to
shit.
cry aloud as if in terror.
Yeah.
Shout after shout came from him, and the others began to run in his direction. "He can't have found the treasure," said old Morgan, hurrying past us.
I mean, you could, but you'd have to re-crit it.
Indeed, as we found
yeah, I
when
think
we
that's
also
fine.
reached the spot, it was something very different.
If you want to do it that
A
way.
pretty big pine, and involved in deep creeper, which had even.
Yeah, I don't really
lifted
understand
some
the
of
point yet
smaller
either.
bones.
So
A human skeleton lay with a few shreds of clothing on the ground. I believe a chill struck for a moment to every heart. "He was a seaman," said George Merry, who, bolder than the rest, had gone up close and was examining the rags of clothing. "Leastways, this is good sea cloth." "Aye, aye," said Silver. "Like enough you wouldn't look to find a bishop here, I reckon. But what sort of a way is that for bones to lie, tainting nature?" Indeed, on a second glance, it seemed impossible to fancy that the body was in a natural position. But for some disarray, the work perhaps of the birds that had fed upon him, or the slow-growing creeper that had gradually enveloped his remains, the man lay perfectly straight, his feet pointing in one direction, his hands raised above his head like a diver's, pointing directly in the opposite. "I've taken a notion into my old numbskull," observed Silver. "Here's the compass. There's the tip-top point of Skeleton Island sticking out like a tooth. Just take a bearing, will you, along the line of them bones." It was done. The body pointed straight in the direction of the island, and the compass read duly east-southeast by east. "I thought so," cried the cook. "This here is a pointer. Right up there is our line for the Pole Star and the Jolly Dollars. But by thunder, if it don't make me cold inside to think of Flint. This is one of his jokes and no mistake. Him and these 6 was alone here. He killed 'em every man. And this one he hauled here and laid down by the compass, shiver my timbers. They're long bones and the hair's been yellow. Aye, that would be Allardyce. You mind Allardyce, Tom Morgan?" "Aye, aye," returned Morgan. "I mind him. He owed me money, he did, and he took my knife ashore with him." "Speaking of knives," said another, "why don't we find his'n lying around? Flint weren't the man to pick a seaman's pocket, and the birds, I guess, would leave it be." "By the powers, and that's true," cried Silver. "There ain't a thing left here," said Merry, still feeling round among the bones. "Not a copper Dwight, nor a baccy box. It don't look natural to me." "No, by gum, it don't," agreed Silver. "Not nat'ral, nor not nice, says you. Great guns, messmates. But if Flint was living, this would be a hot spot for you and me. 6 they were, and 6 are we, and bones is what they are now." "I saw him dead with these here deadlights," said Morgan. "Billy took me in. There he laid with penny pieces on his eyes." "Dead? Aye, sure enough he's dead and gone below," said the fellow with the bandage. "But if ever spirit walked it would be Flint's, dear heart. But he died bad, did Flint." "Aye, that he did," observed another. "Now he raged, and now he hollered for the rum, and now he sang 15 Men were his only song, mates. And I tell you true, I never rightly liked to hear it since. It was main hot, and the windy was open, and I hear that old song a-coming out as clear, and the death haul on the man already." "Come, come," said Silver, "stow this talk. He's dead and he don't walk, that I know. Leastways, he won't walk by day, and you may later that. Care killed a cat. Fetch a head for the doubloons. We started, certainly, but in spite of the hot sun and the staring daylight, the pirates no longer ran separate and shouting through the wood, but kept side by side and spoke with bated breath. The terror of the dead buccaneer had fallen on their spirits. End of chapter 31. Chapter 32. The Treasure Hunt. The Voice Among the Trees. Partly from the damping influence of this alarm, partly to rest Silver and the sick folk, the whole party sat down as soon as they had gained the brow of the ascent. The plateau being somewhat tilted toward the west, this spot on which we had paused commanded a wide prospect on either hand. Before us, over the tree-tops, we held the cape of the woods, fringed with surf. Behind, we not only looked down upon the anchorage and Skeleton Island, but saw, clear across the spit and the eastern lowlands, a great field of open sea upon the east. Sheer above us rose the spyglass, here dotted with single pines, there black with precipices. There was no sound but that of the distant breakers mounting from all around, and the chirp of countless insects in the brush. Not a man, not a sail on the sea. The very largeness of the view increased the sense of solitude. Silver, as he sat, took certain bearings with his compass. "There are 3 tall trees," said he, "about in the right line from Skeleton Island. Spyglass shoulder. I take it means that lower point there. It's child's play to find the stuff now. I've half a mind to dine first." "I don't feel sharp," growled Morgan. "Thinking of Flint, I think it were, has done me." "Well, my son, you praise your stars he's dead," said Silver. "He was a ugly devil," cried a third pirate with a shudder. "That blue in the face, too." "That was how the rum took him," added Merry. "Blue? Well, I reckon he was blue. That's a true word." Ever since they had found the skeleton and got upon this train of thought, they had spoken lower and lower, and they had almost got to whispering by now, so that the sound of their talk hardly interrupted the silence of the wood. All of a sudden, out of the middle of the trees in front of us, a thin, high, trembling voice struck up the well-known air and words. 50 men on the dead man's chest, yo ho ho, and a bottle of rum. I never have seen men more dreadfully affected than the pirates. The colour went from their 6 faces like enchantment. Some leapt to their feet, some clawed hold of others. Morgan grovelled on the ground. "It's Flint, by!" cried Merry. The song had stopped as suddenly as it began, broken off, you would have said, in the middle of a note, as though someone had laid his hand upon the singer's mouth. Coming so far through the clear and sunny atmosphere among the green tree-tops, I thought it had sounded airily and sweetly, and the effect on my companions was the stranger. "Come," said Silver, struggling with his ashen lips to get the word out. "That won't do. Stand by to go about. This is a rum start, and I can't name the voice, but it's someone skylarking. Someone that's flesh and blood, and you may lay to that." His courage had come back as he spoke, and some of the colour to his face along with it. Already the others had begun to lend an ear to this encouragement, and were coming a little to themselves, when the same voice broke out again, not this time singing, but in a faint, distant hail that echoed yet fainter among the clefts of the spyglass. "Darby McGraw," it wailed, for that is the word that best describes the sound. "Darby McGraw, Darby McGraw." Again and again and again, and then rising a little higher, and with an oath that I leave out. "Fetch off the rum, Darby." The buccaneers remained rooted to the ground, their eyes starting from their heads. Long after the voice had died away, they still stared in silence, dreadfully before them. "That fixes it," gasped one. "Let's go." "They was his last words," moaned Morgan. "His last words above board." Dick had his Bible out and was praying volubly. He had been well brought up, had Dick, before he had come to sea and fell among bad companions. Still, Silver was unconquered. I could hear his teeth rattle in his head, but he had not surrendered. "Nobody in this here island ever heard of Derby," he muttered. "Not one but us that's here." And then, making a great effort, "Shipmates," he cried, "I'm here to get that stuff, and I'll not be beat by man nor devil. I never was feared of Flint in his life, and by the powers I'll face him dead. There's £700,000 not a quarter of a mile from here. When did ever a gentleman of fortune show his stern to that much dollars for a boozy old seaman with a blue mug, and him dead too?" But there was no sign of reawakening courage in his followers, rather indeed of growing terror at the irreverence of his words. "Belay there, John," said Mary. "Don't you cross a spirit." And the rest were all too terrified to reply. They would have run away severally had they dared, but fear kept them together, and kept them close to John, as if his daring helped them. He, on his part, had pretty well fought his weakness down. "Spirit? Well, maybe," he said, "but there's one thing not clear to me. There was an echo. Now, no man ever seen a spirit with a shadow. Well then, what's he doing with an echo to him, I should like to know? That ain't in nature, surely." This argument seemed weak enough to me, but you can never tell what will affect the superstitious, and, to my worry, George Merry was greatly relieved. "Well, that's so," he said. "You've head upon your shoulders, John, and no mistake. 'Bout shipmates, this here crew is on a wrong tack, I do believe, and you come to think on it, it was like Flint's voice, I grant you, but not just so clear away like it after all. It was like somebody else's voice now. It was like By the powers, Ben Gunn!" roared Silver. "Aye, and so it were," cried Morgan, springing on his knees. "Ben Gunn it were." "It don't make much odds, do it now?" asked Dick. "Ben Gunn's not here in the body any more of Flint." But the older hands greeted this remark with scorn. "Why, nobody minds Ben Gunn," cried Merry. "Dead or alive, nobody minds him." It was extraordinary how their spirits had returned, and how the natural colour had revived in their faces. Soon they were chatting together, with intervals of listening, and not long after, hearing no further sound, they shouldered the tools and set forth again, Merry walking first with Silver's compass to keep them on the right line with Skeleton Island. He had said the truth. Dead or alive, nobody minded Ben Gunn. Dick alone still held his Bible, and looked around him as he went with fearful glances, but he found no sympathy, and Silver even joked him on his precautions. "I told you," said he, "I told you had spoiled your Bible. If it ain't no good to swear by, what do you suppose a spirit will give for it? Not that!" And he snapped his big fingers, halting a moment on his crutch. But Dick was not to be comforted. Indeed, it was soon plain to me that the lad was falling sick, hastened by heat, exhaustion, and the shock of his alarm. The fever predicted by Dr. Livesey was evidently growing swiftly higher. It was fine open walking here upon the summit. Our way lay a little downhill, for, as I have said, the plateau tilted toward the west. The pines, great and small, grew wide apart, and even between the clumps of nutmeg and azalea, wide open spaces baked in the hot sunshine. Striking as we did pretty near northwest across the island, we drew, on the one hand, even nearer under the shoulders of the spyglass, and, on the other, looked even wider over that western bay where I had once tossed and trembled in the coracle. The first of the tall trees was reached, and, by the bearing, proved the wrong one. So with the second, and the third rose nearly 200 feet into the air above a clump of underwood, a giant of a vegetable, with a red column as big as a cottage, and a wide shadow around in which a company could have manoeuvred. It was conspicuous far to sea, both on the east and west, and might have been entered as a sailing mark upon the chart. But it was not its size that now impressed my companions. It was the knowledge that £700,000 in gold lay somewhere buried below its spreading shadow. The thought of the money, as they drew nearer, swallowed up their previous terrors. Their eyes burned in their heads, their feet grew speedier and lighter, their whole soul was bound up in that fortune, that whole lifetime of extravagance and pleasure that lay awaiting there for each of them. Silver hobbled, grunting, on his crutch. His nostrils stood out and quivered. He cursed like a madman when the flies settled on his hot and shiny countenance. He plucked furiously at the line that held me to him, and from time to time turned his eyes upon me with a deadly look. Certainly he took no pains to hide his thoughts, and certainly I read them like print. In the immediate nearness of the gold all else had been forgotten. His promise and the doctor's warning were both things of the past, and I could not doubt that he hoped to seize upon the treasure, find and board the Hispaniola under cover of night, cut every honest throat about that island, and sail away as he had first intended, laden with crimes and riches. Shaken as I was with these alarms, it was hard for me to keep up with the rapid race of the treasure hunters. Now and again I stumbled, and it was then that Silver plucked so roughly at the rope and launched at me his murderous glances. Dick, who had dropped behind us and now brought up the rear, was babbling to himself both prayers and curses as his fever kept rising. This also added to my wretchedness, and, to crown all, I was haunted by the thought of the tragedy that had once been acted on that plateau, when that ungodly buccaneer with the blue face, he who had died at Savannah singing and shouting for drink, had there with his own hand cut down his 6 accomplices. This grove that was now so peaceful must have rung with cries, I thought, and even with the thought I could believe I heard it ringing still. We were now at the margin of the thicket. "Huzzah, mates, all together!" shouted Merry, and the foremost broke into a run. And suddenly, not 10 yards farther, we beheld them stop. A low cry arose. Silver doubled his pace, digging away with the foot of his crutch like one possessed, and the next moment he and I had come also to a dead halt. Before us was a great excavation, not very recent, for the sides had fallen in and grass had sprouted on the bottom. In this were the shaft of a pick broken in two, and the boards of several packing cases strewn around. On one of these boards I saw branded with a hot iron the name Walrus, the name of Flint's ship. All was clear to probation. The cash had been found and rifled. The £700,000 were gone. End of chapter 32. Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson. Read by Adrian Pretzelis. Chapter 3. The Black Spot. About noon I stopped at the captain's door with some cooling drinks and medicines. He was lying very much as we had left him, only a little higher, and he seemed both weak and excited. "Jim," he said, "you're the only one here that's worth anything, and you know I've always been good to you. Never a month but I've given you a silver fourpenny for yourself. And now, you see, mate, I'm pretty low and deserted by all. And, Jim, you'll bring me one noggin of rum now, won't you, matey?" "The doctor," I began. But he broke in, cursing the doctor in a feeble voice, but heartily. "Doctors is all swabs," he said. "And that doctor there, why, what does he know about seafaring men? I've been in places hot as pitch, and mates dropping round with Yellow Jack, and the blessed land a heaving like the sea with earthquakes. What do the doctor know of lands like that? And I've lived on rum, I can tell you. It's been meat and drink, and man and wife to me, and if I'm not to have my rum now, I'm a poor old hulk on a lee shore. My blood'll be on you, Jim, and that Dr. Swab." And he ran on again for a while with curses. "Look, Jim, how my fingers fidges," he continued in the pleading tone. "I can't keep 'em still, not I. I haven't had a drop this blessed day. That doctor's a fool, I tell you. If I don't have a drain of rum, Jim, I'll have the horrors. I seen some on 'em already. I seen old Flint in the corner there behind you, plain as print I seen him. And if I get the horrors, I'm a man that has lived rough, and I'll raise Cain. Your doctor hisself said one glass wouldn't hurt me. I'll give you a golden guinea for a noggin, Jim." He was growing more and more excited, and this alarmed me, for my father, who was very low that day, needed quiet. Besides, I was reassured by the doctor's words, now quoted to me, and rather offended by the offer of a bribe. "I want none of your money," said I, "but what you owe my father. I'll get you one glass and no more." When I brought it to him he seized it greedily and drank it out. "Aye, aye," said he, "that's some better sure enough. And now, matey, did that doctor say how long I was to lie here in this old berth?" "A week at least," said I. "Thunder!" he cried. "A week? I can't do that. They'd have the black spot on me by then. The lubbers is going to get the wind of me this blessed moment. Lubbers as couldn't keep what they got, and want to nail what is another's. Is that seamanly behaviour now, I want to know? But I'm a saving soul. I never wasted good money of mine, nor lost it neither, and I'll trick 'em again. I'm not afraid on them. I'll shake out another reef, matey, and dandle 'em again." As he was thus speaking he had risen from bed with great difficulty, holding to my shoulder with a grip that almost made me cry out, and moving his legs like so much dead weight. His words,
Hey,
spirited
good job,
as they
bro.
were in meaning, contrasted sadly with the weakness of the voice in which they were uttered. He paused when he had got into a sitting position on the edge. "That doctor's done me," he murmured. "My ears is singing. Lay me back." Before I could do much to help him, he had fallen back again to his former place, where he lay for a while silent. "Jim," he said at length, "you saw that seafaring man today?" "Black Dog?" I asked. "Ah, Black Dog," said he. "He's a bad 'un, but there's worse that put him on. Now if I can't get away nohow, and they tip me the black spot, mind you, it's my old sea chest they're after. You get on a horse, you can, can't you? Well then, You get on a horse and go to, well, yes, I will, to that eternal Doctor Swab, and tell him to pipe all hands, magistrates and sich, and he'll lay 'em aboard at the Admiral Benbow. All old Flint's crew, man and boy, all on 'em that's left. I was first mate, I was, old Flint's first mate, and I'm the only one as knows the place. He gave it me to Savannah, when he lay a-dying, like as if I was to now, you see. But you won't peach unless they got the black spot on me, or unless you see that black dog again, or a seafaring man with one leg, Jim, him above all." "But what is the black spot, Captain?" I asked. "That's a summons, mate. I'll tell you if they get that. But you'll keep your weather eye open, Jim, and I'll share with you equals, upon my honour." He wandered a little longer, his voice growing weaker, but soon after I had given him his medicine, which he took like a child, with the remark, "If ever a seaman wanted drugs, it's me," he fell at last into a heavy swoon-like sleep, in which I left him. What I should have done had all gone well I do not know. Probably I should have told the whole story to the doctor, for I was in mortal fear lest the captain should repent of his confessions and make an end of me. But as things fell out, my poor father died quite suddenly that evening, which put all other matters on one side. Our natural distress, the visits of the neighbours, the arranging of the funeral, and all the work of the inn to be carried on in the meanwhile, kept me so busy that I had scarcely time to think of the captain, far less to be afraid of him. He got downstairs next morning, to be sure, and had his meals as usual, though he ate little, and had more, I'm afraid, than his usual supply of rum, for he helped himself out of the bar, scowling and blowing through his nose, and no one dared to cross him. On the night before the funeral he was as drunk as ever, and it was shocking in that house of mourning to hear him singing away his ugly old sea-song. But weak as he was, we were all in fear of death for him, and the doctor was suddenly taken up with a case many miles away, and was never near the house after my father's death. I have said the captain was weak, and indeed he seemed rather to grow weaker than to regain his strength. He clambered up and down stairs, and went from the parlour to the bar and back again, and sometimes put his nose out of door to smell the sea, holding on to the walls as he went for support, and breathing hard and fast like a man on a steep mountain. He never particularly addressed me, and it is my belief that he had as good as forgotten his confidences, but his temper was more flighty, and, allowing for his bodily weaknesses, more violent than ever. He had an alarming way now, when he was drunk, of drawing his cutlass and laying it bare before him on the table. But with all that he minded people less, and seemed shut up in his own thoughts and rather wandering. Once, for instance, to our extreme wonder, he piped up to a very different air, a kind of country love song that he must have learned in his youth before he had begun to follow the sea. So things passed until the day after the funeral, and about 3 o'clock of a bitter, foggy, frosty afternoon I was standing at the door for a moment, full of sad thoughts about my father, when I saw someone drawing slowly near along the road. He was plainly blind, for he tapped before him with a stick, and wore a great green shade over his eyes and nose, and he was hunched as if with age or weakness, and wore a huge old tattered sea-cloak with a hood that made him appear positively deformed. I never saw in my life a more dreadful-looking figure. He stopped a little from the inn, and, raising his voice in an old sing-song, addressed the air in front of him. "Will any kind friend inform a poor blind man who has lost the precious sight of his eyes in the gracious defence of his native country, England, and God bless King George, where or in what part of this country he may now be?" "You are at the Admiral Benbow, Black Hill Cove, my good man," said I. "I hear a voice," said he, "a young voice. Will you give me your hand, my kind young friend, and lead me in?" I held out my hand, and the horrible, soft-spoken, eyeless creature gripped it in a moment like a vice. I was so much startled that I struggled to withdraw, but the blind man pulled me close to him with a single action of his arm. "Now, boy," he said, "take me in to the captain." "Sir," said I, "upon my word I dare not." "Oh," he sneered, "that's it. Take me in, straight, or I'll break your arm." He gave it, as he spoke, a wrench that made me cry out. "Sir," said I, "it is for yourself I mean. The captain is not what he used to be. He sits with a drawn cutlass. Another gentleman—" "Come now, march," interrupted he, and I never heard a voice so cruel and cold and ugly as that blind man's. It cowed me more than the pain, and I began to obey him at once, walking straight in at the door and towards the parlour, where the sick old buccaneer was sitting, dazed with rum. The blind man clung close to me, holding me in one iron fist, and leaning almost more of his weight on me than I could carry. "Lead me straight up to him, and when I'm in view, cry out, 'Here's a friend for you, Bill.' If you don't, I'll do this." And with that he gave me a twitch that I thought would have made me faint. Between this and that I was so utterly terrified by the blind beggar that I forgot my terror of the captain, and as I opened the parlour door cried out the words he had ordered in a trembling voice. The poor captain raised his eyes, and at one look the rum went out of him and left him staring sober. The expression of his face was not so much of terror as of mortal sickness. He made a movement to rise, but I do not believe he had enough force left in his body. "Now, Bill, sit where you are," said the beggar. "If I can't see, I can hear a finger stirring. Business is business. Hold out your left hand. Boy, take his left hand by the wrist and bring it near to my right." We both obeyed him to the letter, and I saw him pass something from the hollow of the hand that held his stick into the palm of the captain's, which closed upon it instantly. "And now that's done," said the blind man, and at the words he suddenly left hold of me, and with incredible accuracy and nimbleness skipped out of the parlour and into the road, where, as I stood motionless, I could hear his stick go tap tap tapping into the distance. It was some time before either I or the captain seemed to gather our senses, but at length, and about the same moment, I released his wrist, which I was still holding, and he drew in his hand and looked sharply into the palm. "10 o'clock," he cried. "6 hours. We'll do 'em yet." And he sprang to his feet. Even as he did so he reeled, put his hand to his throat, stood swaying for a moment, and then, with a peculiar sound, fell from his whole height face foremost to the floor. I ran to him at once, calling to my mother, but haste was all in vain. The captain had been struck dead by thundering apoplexy. It is a curious thing to understand, for I had certainly never liked the man, though of late I had begun to pity him. But soon as I saw that he was dead, I burst into a flood of tears. It was the second death I had known, and the sorrow of the first was still fresh in my heart. End of chapter 3. Chapter 4. The Sea Chest. I lost no time, of course, in telling my mother all that I knew, and perhaps should have told her long before, and we saw ourselves at once in a difficult and dangerous position. Some of the man's money, if he had any, was certainly due to us, but it was not likely that our captain's shipmates, above all the 2 specimens seen by me, Black Dog and the blind beggar, would be inclined to give up their booty in payment of the dead man's debts. The captain's order to mount at once and ride for Dr. Livesey would have left my mother alone and unprotected, which was not to be thought of. Indeed, it seemed impossible for either of us to remain much longer in the house. The fall of coals in the kitchen grate, the very ticking of the clock, filled us with alarm. The neighbourhood, to our ears, seemed haunted by approaching footsteps, and what between the dead body of the captain on the parlour floor and the thought of that detestable blind beggar hovering near at hand and ready to return, there were moments when, as the saying goes, I jumped in my skin for terror. Something must speedily be resolved upon, and it occurred to us at last to go forth together and seek help in the neighbouring hamlet. No sooner said than done. Bareheaded as we were, we ran out at once in the gathering evening and the frosty fog. The hamlet lay not many 100 yards away, though out of view on the other side of the next cove, and what greatly encouraged me, it was in an opposite direction from that whence the old blind man had made his appearance, and whither he had presumably returned. We were not many minutes on the road, though we sometimes stopped to lay hold of each other and hearken. But there was no unusual sound, nothing but the low wash of the ripple and the croaking of the inmates of the wood. It was already candlelight when we reached the hamlet, and I shall never forget how much I was cheered to see the yellow shine in doors and windows, but that, as it proved, was the best help we were likely to get in that quarter, for, you would have thought men would have been ashamed of themselves, no soul would consent to return with us to the Admiral Benbow. The more we told of our troubles, the more, man, woman and child, they clung to the shelter of their houses. The name of Captain Flint, though it was strange to me, was well enough known to some there, and carried a great weight of terror. Some of the men who had been to field work on the far side of the Admiral Benbow remembered, besides, to have seen several strangers on the road, and, taking them to be smugglers, to have bolted away. And one at least had seen a little lugger in what we called Kit's Hole. For that matter, anyone who was a comrade of the captain's was enough to frighten them to death.
Okay.
And the short and the long of the matter was that while we could get several who were willing to ride to Dr. Livesey's, which lay in another direction, not one would help us to defend the inn. They say cowardice is infectious, but then argument is, on the other hand, a great emboldener, and so when each had said his say, my mother made them a speech. She would not, she declared, lose money that belonged to her fatherless boy. "If none of the rest of you dare," she said, "Jim and I dare. Back we will go the way we came, and small thanks to you big hulking chicken-hearted men. We'll have that chest open if we die for it, and I'll thank you for that bag, Mrs. Crossley, to bring back our lawful money in." Of course I said I would go with my mother, and of course they all cried out at our foolhardiness. But even then not a man would go along with us. All they would do was to give me a loaded pistol lest we were attacked, and to promise to have horses ready saddled in case we were pursued on our return, while one lad was to ride forward to the doctor's in search of armed assistance. My heart was beating fiercely when we two set forth in the cold night upon this dangerous venture. A full moon was beginning to rise and peered redly through the upper edges of the fog, and this increased our haste, for it was plain, before we came forth again, that all would be bright as day and our departure exposed to the eyes of any watchers. We slipped along the hedges, noiseless and swift, nor did we see anything to increase our terrors till, to our huge relief, the door of the Admiral Benbow had closed behind us. I slipped the bolt at once, and we stood and panted for a moment in the dark, alone in the house with the dead captain's body. Then my mother got a candle in the bar, and, holding each other's hands, we advanced into the parlour. He lay as we had left him,